A solid 17-year marriage is suddenly rocked to the core.
They had a happy family, so he thought.
As a crushing betrayal pushes a gentle, loving father to the edge.
The world that he had set up for himself obviously was coming crashing down.
What happens when the life you thought you could depend on day in and day out for nearly 17 years, wrapped in deep devotion to kids and a marriage, is one day, with no apparent warning, torn apart by the betrayal of the love bond? It's likely few of us would react with anything less than deep despair, yet few of us would take it so far as to plunge into a powerful rage that ends in a crime of passion, leaving a beloved spouse dead. It's 1994 in Bangladesh when the educated Rafat Chowdhury meets Hafiza.
They met in Bangladesh. It was an arranged marriage. He met her, I believe, on the wedding day, but indicated that he grew to love her, and he saw her as not only his wife, but as his best friend.
By all accounts, the feelings of friendship and growing love are mutual. Although the marriage demanded Hafiza give up a teenaged romance her parents were dead set against. Together, they set out for Canada, and in time, they create a family with 2 daughters, the eldest of whom is developmentally delayed.
So he left his home country to make a better life for his family in Canada. They moved to Montreal initially, before moving to Toronto and making Toronto their home. He's a man who's devoted his entire life, working 100 hours a week, to better the life of his children.
We have a man came to this country and began working as a baker. In order to keep this family going, he took on a job at a community center as a maintenance man.
Some people might call it a Canadian dream, but I think it was, in some ways, to me, a nightmare, because he started work at the bakery at 6 a.m., and he finished work at the community center doing maintenance work, which is not, I don't think that's light duties, at midnight.
Rafat's punishing schedule, though, has a price. He's left little time for his marriage, a problem that he tries to remedy with a business venture.
So basically, the 2 businesses he had at the flea market were 2 stalls, and he had acted a little bit.
He'd have Monday mornings off, and then Monday he would go to a wholesaler to buy the items he needed to sell at his flea market on Saturday and Sunday. So I think he loved working as hard as he did because he was doing what he thought he should do as a man. It was his goal to save enough money to send his children to university, and he talked about that a lot, that I just want my children to go to university so that they can be happy. But by all accounts, everything he did was for his family. Because he was working all the time, they must not have been able to communicate that much.
As stressful it was, they did succeed in having their own home. So they did quite well for themselves. And we can become sensitized to some of the difficulties that immigrant families may have in trying to integrate into a new culture.
By 2005, despite Rafat's efforts, Hafiza has become mysteriously withdrawn and sickly, rarely venturing out and barely able to cook. Rafat, though, never wonders why.
He seemed to make very few demands on her. And so I suspect maybe in the North American context, she maybe did feel that she'd missed out on something, that she was shortchanged.
Hafiza's despair could only last for so long before reaching its breaking point. And by June 2005, it comes with a sudden announcement.
Hafiza Chowdhury told her husband, I'm going to Bangladesh. I am going to see my sister who is sick with cancer, but I'm going to bring only the younger daughter with me. I want you to keep the eldest daughter here. This confused Mr. Chowdhury. He didn't understand why she would bring only one of the daughters to Bangladesh. But he, in his typical way, said, okay, if that's what you want to do, then do it. He even bought her suitcases so that she could take the trip more comfortably.
Hafiza's apparent favoring of the youngest child and their abrupt trip will soon set in motion a deadly turn of events in the Chowdhury home. And by the middle of July, the daughters, 15 and 9, will find themselves in a family torn apart by a crime of passion.
What he thought he had was a happy family, 2 wonderful daughters, a wife who he believed loved him, and in spite of her having medical problems, they had a happy family. So he thought.
A hard-working Canadian immigrant, Rafat Chowdhury, dreams of creating a comfortable life for his children and wife Hafiza, a life built on long hours at 3 jobs. He had no reason to believe his dream wasn't on his doorstep.
Here's an example of a very hard-working man who, in all other respects, would set a shining example to people of what hard work can achieve.
But in 2005, Rafat's fate shifts without warning to a different path. It's June, and Rafat's sickly 41-year-old wife, Hafiza, makes a surprise announcement.
Hafiza had sprung on Rafat the fact that she was going to Bangladesh. So he was taken aback by the fact that he didn't get much notice, and she only took the younger daughter.
Rafat buys his wife and daughter new luggage and sees them off, but something is soon amiss.
Previously, when Hafiza had traveled to Bangladesh without Rafat, she would call him. Hafiza would call and say, "I arrived safely, I'm okay." In this instance, she did not call him.
2 days later, a letter arrives for Hafiza. Rafat opens it, since the couple always freely opened each other's mail, but its contents hit Rafat like a bombshell.
And once he opened it and read it, he understood the true purpose of her trip.
And to his shock, it was a love letter written by the man who she had hoped to marry. And it then became apparent to Mr. Chowdhury that his wife was perhaps back in her native country, associating with this individual.
The author of the letter professed his love for Hafiza, but that he felt to preserve their own respective families, maybe it was best that they just let it be. She must have communicated with this gentleman.
He was absolutely devastated. He was depressed, contemplated suicide.
He felt awful. He felt betrayed. He felt terrible about the fact that his wife was pursuing a relationship with another man.
But was Hafiza really pursuing another relationship, or was it a fantasy concocted out of her unhappiness? After all, the old boyfriend, the one her parents forbade her to marry years before, wrote that their love could not be realized. The letter nonetheless feels catastrophic for Rafat.
After Mr. Chowdhury read the letter, he realized that the marriage that he had had for 17 years, the life that he thought he had, everything came crashing down.
Over the phone from Bangladesh, Hafiza confirms that she wants out of the marriage, but Rafat begs her to reconsider. Hafiza, though, offers Rafat little hope. He then spends weeks intensely anxious and sad, wondering how he can save his family and marriage. July 13th, Hafiza finally returns from Bangladesh with their youngest daughter. Rafat takes one look at her and is shattered.
When she returned from Bangladesh, she had a symbol worn on her nose, a nose ring.
She hadn't worn the nose stud that Rafat Chowdhury had given her for years. And that sort of became very clear to him that she either already married this other man in Bangladesh or intended to marry this other man in Bangladesh, and therefore was leaving Rafat. The statement, at least provided by the younger daughter who was there with her in Bangladesh, suggested that she was spending a lot of time with this gentleman.
Mrs. Chowdhury had indicated to her husband that she wanted a divorce. His first thought was, how can you do this to the children? How can you break up the family for the children?
Rafat knows that Hafiza loves their girls and hopes the marriage crisis can pass. But then, according to Rafat, their arguments become filled with her alarming demands.
In fact, she had even talked to him about sponsoring this man to Canada to live in the very same matrimonial home.
All of the neighbors testified that they didn't believe that there was any troubles in the marriage whatsoever. So one has to wonder if she was going through her own emotional crisis at the time that led her to say the things that she did.
It's late evening, July 17th, 4 days after Hafizah's return. And this loving father will find himself struggling to explain to police how he blacked out, then found himself looking down on his bed, his daughter cowering in a corner, and his wife moments from death.
Rafat Chaudhry made the phone call to the police and instructed the dispatcher that he had been in an argument with his wife. And I believe he said that he had pushed her and she was bleeding from the nose.
Hello? Roger's sick.
Summer of 2005 in Toronto, and a deadly mix of romantic betrayal, depression, and anger will rage out of control as a devoted father, Rafat Chaudhry, frantically tries to keep his wife from leaving him and their daughters.
He had committed himself entirely to her, and he felt what the breakup of their marriage would potentially do to their children. And he tried to convince her or speak to her and persuade her to reconsider her decision and think about it rationally.
But Hafizah, Rafat's wife of 17 years, is not thinking rationally. She is desperate to leave the family so she can be with an old lover from her youth, a man still in her native Bangladesh.
The vision that he had of him being a hardworking husband, supporting his wife and family who were happy with him, suddenly it was meaningless.
It's Sunday, July 17th, the end of another hard work week, one filled with Rafat's mounting anxiety. The Chaudhrys have been fighting for 4 days. It's after 10 p.m., and Rafat tries again to talk his wife out of leaving him.
He sees his eldest daughter watching television, and he goes,